Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
As I mentioned in my introduction to Lecha Dodi and the melody of Eli Zion, we are approaching the time of Tisha B'Av. In fact, there are different stages leading up to that, beginning with the fast of Tammuz, moving into the beginning of the month of Av, and then culminating with Tisha B'Av, which is next Monday night and Tuesday. And we at Temple Israel are again this year hosting the community-wide commemoration of Tisha B'Av. It's important this year, even more than most, to be together. So hopefully you'll be able to join us at 7:30 p.m. on Monday night. But this is not just a commercial, because I want to talk a little bit about Tisha B'Av. What does Tisha B'Av commemorate? I mentioned sort of vaguely some of the worst disasters of our history, but honestly, that's a long list. So which in particular is Tisha B'Av commemorating? Anyone know one of them or more?
The destruction of the temple and the expulsion from Spain.
The destruction of the first temple, the Temple of Solomon, and the destruction of the second temple, destroyed by the Romans almost 2,000 years ago, and the expulsion of the Jews from Spain. And there's more than just that.
The final decision to exterminate the Jews in the Shoah.
The decision to exterminate the Jews in the Shoah, the formal beginning of hostilities for World War I, which completely caused massive upheaval for Jews across the European theater and led to many of our deaths in both combat as well as in the repercussions, whether it be the eventual rise of Nazism or the Soviet Union and their treatment of the Jews, which many of us, I think, are very familiar with. And of course, the same day is also the beginning of the First Crusades, which is a watershed moment, transforming our relationship to the European world around us, and essentially causing the deaths of tens of thousands of Jews in many different communities, stretching all the way from Europe into the Middle East. That's quite a day, and quite a lot of disasters. However, this is the time of the Olympics. And as we know, one of the most popular events in the modern Olympic spirit is the Pity Olympics. Is that really all the bad stuff? Is that really the worst that the Jews have had to suffer? I mean, come on, yes, Tisha B'Av is bad. But does it compare to the Shoah? To the 6 million who were killed directly by the Nazis in World War II, not to mention the countless others that were killed, not at their hand directly, but through everything else that was caused and destroyed during that time? I mean, if you added up all the deaths that took place prior to that, I'm fairly confident that they would not reach 6 million. They'd be, something half of that perhaps, populations being lower in the ancient world, of course. So can we really call Tisha B'Av the worst day? Haven't we suffered more in more recent generations? And besides, even if we were going to say that Tisha B'Av is bad, obviously it's bad, right now, think about what Israel is going through. 10 months of war, 10 months after one of the worst attacks on Jewish life, and all done under the shadow not only of what is happening now with the fighting with Hamas and Hezbollah, but with the shadow of Iran, ever inching closer to having nuclear weapons which could wipe out Israel like that into a nuclear wasteland. So, really, we live at the worst time, right? Yes, those people who had to live through the marauding crusaders, it was bad, but right now, it's much worse, right? Those people who lived through the expulsion of Spain, it was bad, but right now, it's much worse. Or perhaps, I'm not selling you. Maybe you're sitting comfortably here in a moderately air-conditioned room in the middle of a country where we have equal citizenship and rights and freedoms and live more comfortably and securely than most times in Jewish history, and perhaps you're not quite buying my entry into the Pity Olympics. But we could at very least argue about which was worse, the first temple destruction or the second temple destruction. Which was worse, the expulsion from Spain or the Crusades? Which was worse of any of the disasters that also took place on this day? But I'd like to argue that as fun as that can be, as a light and entertaining after-dinner conversation, pity is not really the mood that we are going for on Tisha B'Av. You see, we commemorate these disasters not because we want sympathy for all of the heartache that our people have endured. We don't commemorate them because we want to show the rest of the world that we have suffered more than any other nation or any other people on the face of the planet. We don't want to just write out the litany of all of the crimes that have been perpetrated against us only so that we can dampen the pages of our prayer books with tears. We commemorate Tisha B'Av because we have hope, not just sorrow. We commemorate Tisha B'Av because sorrow without hope is self-pity. Sorrow that merely says, oh, woe is me, life is terrible, things have been bad, I have been done upon terribly. If that's the extent of your reflection, then you're not getting the idea behind Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is here to tell us things have been horrible. Things were terrible. In fact, on this one day, more terrible things happened to our people on the one day than at any other day in the calendar, for which we are grateful that God bundled all of those disasters together rather than making us commemorate new disasters every day. But those disasters tell us something. One, that we are resilient, because we are still here. And two, that we should have hope. That we should recognize that all of these different disasters point out that there was a fundamental flaw in each different generation that needs to be overcome, and that we can overcome that. We go into Tisha B'Av, yes, mourning our loss, feeling the pain of the world not being right because so many people have gone to great lengths to keep it from becoming right. So many have attacked those who wanted to do right. So many have torn down those who were trying to build a better world. And yet, we recognize that we pick ourselves up out of that dust. We rise out of the valley of tears, as Lachadodi says, and we build again, and we build again, and we build again, and we inch closer and closer and closer to that moment of redemption where the world will finally, collectively, universally say, enough of the tearing down, enough of the causing of suffering, enough of the needless pain that is inflicted from one human to another. This is not the way the world is meant to be. This is not the way the world has to be. In other cultures that remember disasters, they simply remember them as being part of the natural cycle of the world. That's the way things go. Armies are going to maraud, people are going to steal, murder and immorality is going to be ever present. It's just what happens. We shed a tear and we move on. And Judaism says, that's not the way the world is supposed to be. It doesn't have to be like that anymore. And if it were up to us, it wouldn't have been like that for most of the last 3,000 years. So, who wants to join with me in making it better? We will shed tears for those who have fallen. We will ache for what the world could have been by this point had humanity worked harder. But we will rise with hope to recognize that the world will get better. It will become the paradise God wanted, and it will only do so if we don't resort to self-pity, but instead use that sorrow to fuel our hope. Shabbat Shalom.